Looking good, Raminder.
Okay. So planning in a VUCA world. So I know if you are maybe confused on what does VUCA stand. So if you are Sinhalese, you would know some terminology where you could have used VUCA in other added language, but let's keep VUCA in the English sense. So planning in a VUCA world. So right now, some of you could be like this. Oh my God, what is happening? So that's when you are drowning in the VUCA environment. But if you are thriving in a VUCA environment, you'll be the boss man. You'll be having fun in this environment, gaining market share and doing everything correctly. But it's first understanding what does VUCA stands for. So VUCA, so VUCA, V is for volatility, U is for uncertainty, C for complexity, and A for ambiguity. So where does this term VUCA come from? So any word, so because I'm quizzing, I know quarantine. Quarantine came from the Venetian language of quarantina, where I say it was about 40 days where they had to quarantine and then only come on board in Venice. So that's where the word quarantina, this quarantine came. So likewise, where did VUCA come from? So the origin of VUCA came after the Cold War, especially because the US forces, it came from the US forces, where they understood that the situation the senior leaders will face in the future military campaigns will not be in your left, where you had long drawn battles fighting face to face with your enemy, but it's more like guerrilla tactical warfare, where you would face different adversaries and you would know where from there they would attack. So that's where this VUCA was first coined and then came into the industry knowledge as well. So I actually heard about VUCA in 2015. So 6 years back. So this has been in the 80s itself. So let's look at a bit more on VUCA, because we need to understand what it stands for. So V is for volatility. So earlier, if you are an FMCG company in supplying the Sri Lankan market, you would know you'll be planning most probably for 2 peaks in a calendar year. One would be for the Singaran Hindu April New Year period, and the other most probably would be for the Christmas period. So you would have your peaks, one coming in March and the other coming in November. So you could plan that. Your other months, you know that it wouldn't change that much drastically because you could plan it out. But right now, you have this situation. What has happened in the developed world? Toilet paper suddenly disappears. Now, if you're a planner, if you're a company which is in the industry of making toilet paper, and if you're in the supply chain of providing materials to the toilet paper manufacturer, think of how they are coping with this volatility, where you couldn't even think of what could happen in the next hour or maybe next minute. That's the VUCA environment. When volatility comes, you don't know what would happen next. And volatility, then we move into uncertainty. Uncertainty is where you can't confidently predict what would happen in the future. So taking the same example, you would have expected toilet paper to run out. And very recently, on 3rd of August, in the start of August, partial closure of Ningbo, which is the world's 3rd busiest cargo port. Now just think of the impact that has on your cargo. Maybe not even your cargo. The cargo that your supplier is bringing to you is getting impacted. And now we are rushing for air freights. You don't have your containers to export your finished goods. All those things arise because right now we are in such a highly uncertain predicament, and you are not able to predict what could happen in the future. So then we move into what we call the C, which is the complexity. Now, you would have one factor accounted with another. If you do a price discounted promotion, you would know your sales would increase. But right now you have so much complexity where you have different number of items which are interconnected. Now, earlier, if it was just like this, now you have interconnectivity where you are not able to predict what would happen if you just do change in one. So that's where the software comes in. But if you don't have a software, then it's up to the human mind to understand what could happen. So you'd see in the government lockdown decisions, these are not only Sri Lanka, but even other countries. You take India, you take Brazil, you take USA, you take New Zealand. Everyone has to consider what could be the health aspect, what is the economic aspect, what would happen to the society. Because if you've been following the news, you would have seen the protests in Australia, in France. These countries, people are coming out and protesting against lockdowns and trying to break from it. But then that's where you have your high complex situation. So if you are a multinational company in different countries, so even if you're not in a multinational company, even if a local company, you would know if you are getting imports from China, you would have the Chinese New Year that they would shut down totally for a 2-week period, maybe even a month, and you would need to plan it ahead. So these are different complexities that are being currently built in because right now, because we are considered a global village. And then we come to the A. A is for ambiguity. So earlier it was either black or white. You have an answer, it's yes or no. But right now, it's a situation where you can't find out whether the decision, will it be right? Will it be partially right? Or will it be maybe a 70%, 30%? Because now there are a lot of factors playing in and you are not clear. So recently, oximeters, you would have seen the Facebook videos where you insert a pencil and you get a reading. So the conclusion is the pen has life. The pen is alive, or the pencil is alive. But if you then look into how an oximeter works, is it passes infrared rays to your finger or the thing that you have inserted in, and then gives a reading. Now, does it mean if you insert a pencil, does it mean that the oximeter is poor? Or is it, if it's not in the quality aspect that you are expecting it to be? So this leads, because of this information overload, again, it leads to an ambiguous situation. So what happens when you are in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations? You feel like you're losing control. Very easily, people hate to lose control of your environment. You need to stay in control. And when you are not in control, you are not sure whether the decisions that you're taking is correct or not. And then you tend to maybe delay, you maybe take it early. You don't know what needs to be done in this situation. And then you're having a lot of time and effort to combat one issue. And then there are certain more which are cropping up. And then people just don't want to do it anymore. And then it leads to anxiety and confusion, and it starts the you did it. Then comes the blame game. And the organization itself is now in this VUCA environment. The organization itself is volatile. The organization itself is uncertain what it needs to be done. It's complex. You don't know who will take a decision, and it's ambiguous. So to overcome everything, so we came a learning where we learned what VUCA is, where it came from, and for any problem, there is always a solution if you want it. So how can companies thrive in a VUCA environment? And this is what the scholars have called, again, it's VUCA. So here it's VUCA prime. So again, VUCA is countered by VUCA. So volatility will be countered by vision. Uncertainty by understanding. Complexity by clarity. And ambiguous by agility. So let's take a look at how you could come out of each environment. So volatility, you need to counter it by a clear vision. The leadership needs to involve all the employees, all your stakeholders on what is the journey that we are going on. Because then even if it's volatile, then you would know we need to go from A to B and here's how we are going. So even if it's the path volatile, still you would know I'm still going to reach at the end. This is my end point. So a really recent example, because I was at HEMA's FMCG. Previous year, government came and said, we are banning the sachet packs, which is less than 20 milliliters. So it was for non-food items. So we had two shampoo sachet ranges. One was Kumarka and the other is Dandex. And mind you, these are producing millions. And again, I'll add another point. Both Kumarka and Dandex are not the market leaders. So just think of the number of sachet packs that was being produced and which was being released to the market, which is being used and which is thrown away. So when this came across, the company could have taken either, okay, we lobby the government. We'll just lobby the government, try to get this off. Or we could have vision, because the requirement why the government put was to reduce your plastic usage, to reduce the amount of plastic which is being thrown into the environment. So that was the vision of the government, and that was the vision that HEMAS took. And after years of working out what are the best options, you would have seen in this market this 40 milliliter plastic bottle. Now it's not the end solution, because still this is plastic, but from a sachet of use where it was only 5 milliliter sachet, where now it's bottle of 40 milliliters. Now at least people would be using it 8 times more, and the company would still be gaining the revenue, but then it would be less polluted the environment. So this is what happens when you have a clear vision on what needs to be done, when you have volatility, when you need to counter volatility by vision. Then you counter uncertainty by understanding. So because you can't predict what most organizations would do unless you are in a company which has a very low shelf life. If you have a shelf life, if your product it has an expiry of maybe 6 months to 1 year, you would increase your safety stock, because that would be one of the easiest thing to do, and it is one of the most like at this moment, one of the most logical things to do as well. But then you can't have your warehouse manager maybe coming to you in another 2 weeks or maybe 1 month and saying, I need more warehouse spaces. Because once you take the decision, once the leadership takes the decision that we are going to increase the safety stock, they also need to understand, yes, our warehousing cost, our stock holding cost will also increase. So what is the point that we want to maintain that safety stock? Do we need to maintain it at X or is it Y? What's that parameters that we are going to ensure that the safety stock is increased? So those decisions, so that's why a leader has to look, listen, and understand what the team is trying to do. And it has to have the flexibility. So recent example, running the plants at this moment, it's a tremendous hassle, because you never know at which point another person in the operation line will get infected. And then you have to remove all the other people who was in contact. You need to set up them in either maybe homes or maybe hotels, or most of the companies right now are engaged with hospitals. So you need to connect with all the stakeholders, and it's not only about yourself. It's not only about the company. So then you need to take care of the employees, families, if they're positive. So that's where your understanding comes on what is happening. So then you disconnect with this uncertainty, and then you have this clear vision of what you are trying to do with your understanding. And then we come to complexity by clarity. So complexity, you need to know what you are in control of. So if you have read the book of Stephen Covey's 7 habits of effective people, you know then the circle of influence, you could increase it. But right now it's about trying to understand what your teams can control and what they're not. So you cannot control a port closure. So if Ningbo port closes down, you are not in control of that. But what you can control is having maybe early contracts with your sea freight providers, so that they ensure that they will provide you with the sufficient amount of containers to ship out your goods. And you need to define your KPIs. So this is all the time used is KPIs, your key performance indicators. Have your key performance indicators, have a few which meets your company objectives. What's your company objective? Do we need to increase? So basic ones are you increase your revenue, you increase your profitability. And then what else is required to ensure that it meets, those are achieved. So you need to have a clear set of things, and that collaboration between teams is really helpful if you have a good SNOP process, so sales and operation planning process. And even if you have a really good one, because it's so dynamic, because it's so changing in this environment, sometimes you would have other additional meetings, or maybe 30-hour catch-up, a daily session. So in Ansel, for the mechanical portfolio, which I'm responsible for a part of it, we have what we call a tiger call between the stakeholders in manufacturing, the marketing, the planning teams, and we go through whether it's a 30-hour call, 30 minutes call, to understand if there are any priorities that has come up. If there is a plant closure that has happened, what needs to be done is, do we need to prioritize? Is there any additional demand that has come in which was not expected during this time period? So this interconnectivity and clear communication between the stakeholders is an essential point when you are in this, what we call this VUCA environment. And finally, ambiguity. Ambiguity countered by agility. So if you had seen the news, you need to adapt new strategies. One was the mobile medicine, which was introduced by Ministry of Health, which is also introduced by in India as well. So you have doctors where they have homebound treatments. And if you could recall 1 year back, there would be people would be put into quarantine centers. They would not allow people to stay at homes because there could be a spread. And even right now, they do have that parameters where they check on what basis a person can stay at home. But that's where they've adopted new strategies. And you need to invest in your members. It's a long told thing where you need to invest, provide to opportunity to work in different functional areas, because that's where they get exposure to different areas, and then they would know what is happening in that area. And another thing is on the project execution principles. So this agile principles was first came in the software industry. So because when you are developing a software, what you would have is you would have small, what they call is a sprint plan, where they would break this project plan into what we call a sprint plan, where they would have, it would be a maximum about maybe 1 month or maybe even 2 weeks. 2 weeks is normally the norm that they have. And they would understand what needs to be achieved during the 2-week period, and then learn from the mistakes. Wow. So once the 2 weeks are gone, they would have again progress meetings during that time as well. And in the end, they would know, okay, what were the things that we wanted to achieve? What did we achieve? Were we not able to do it? Were there any changes in the plan? Because sometimes you have your regulatory, there could be changes in regulatory environment. Then the teams will be incorporating this into the project plan as and when those happen, rather than waiting. Maybe earlier you presented your board of directors maybe once in 2 months, maybe once in 3 months. But now the project manager is in the know about it, and he could then quickly pass it to the relevant people to get the approvals and then come back to the project team. So agile, the way of project management in an agile manner is really helpful in this environment. But even if you do everything, so if you want to do everything, it's all being done by people. It's not a situation where you have robots conducting these matters in the end, because in this environment is created by people. And if you want to thrive, it's again up to the people. So that's where your leadership matters. Here, leaders, so you are the ones who are listening, even myself, we all are leaders in our own areas. So you have to accept that you don't know everything. That's the first thing of a leader, that accepting the fact that you don't know everything. And then you need to leave your ego aside and be able to listen to others, get their solutions, understand what they're trying to say, listen to them, and then work with this team. So that's where this creating common vision with members, clear communication, everything falls into place when people understand we don't know everything. So that's the first step of a leadership coaching that anyone can take, and then you build this continuous learning environment where you learn. So this VUCA, it's a continuously changing environment. You need to be on the top. And when you have what we call this celebrating success, that's why I give some bit of emphasis there. It's not about maybe giving them financial rewards, no, just saying good job to your members, to your team members. If once they have done something that you were expecting them to do, just say good job. So that gives them a lot of motivation. And if you have achieved the project executed as per the requirement, there could have been in the journey, it's nothing perfect. There's nothing called perfection in the journey, because you will have your ups and downs, but what matters is once you reach to an end, you need to celebrate it. So that's why you need to celebrate your small successes, because that's when these future ready companies, they'll be open to experimentation and they'll be comfortable with uncertainty. Companies, if you are comfortable with uncertainty, so that's when it's not companies that would be comfortable with uncertainty. It's the people that are in these companies are comfortable with uncertainty. They would know that anything could go wrong. So I'll just take a quick example right now. So I'm doing a presentation from my home. So I tried to see what can go wrong. So first thing is lights could go out, electricity could go out. So I have two emergency lamps right here. So that's how you plan. You try to see, because it's uncertainty is not going to go away. It's here to stay. It's how you quickly try to adapt and thrive in that environment. And then another important point is psychological and physical self-awareness. You need to understand what makes you tick, what makes your team members tick, because everyone isn't motivated in the same factors. So you need to understand how they would react, how they would respond, how to get the best out of them. So it's because that's why we are not working with robots here. We are working with human beings who are living, breathing, and you need to understand how they tick. And then once you understand it, you will have what we call this responsive culture. There are people will be able to adapt, manage, comfortable with uncertainty, and companies will then look. Earlier, it was looking onwards, looking on to your competitors. But right now, it's not about looking only at your competitors or only at your customers. It's not that. You need to go beyond that. You need to think about what are the value systems that is happening in this environment. What are the technological developments, which is one of the major reasons why VUCA is here to stay, because the technology is changing rapidly. Quick example, Ansel. Ansel is into what we call safety. So what Ansel provides is safety. So they provide gloves in the healthcare sector, as well as the industrial for the mechanical sector, then body suits. So it's all about safety. Now, if you want to keep people safe, first you need to have people working, right? Now, what would happen, because we know there are a lot of automations coming in, machines are working in the front line. So then, do they need safety? Do they need gloves? Do they need protective equipment? So that's why companies just can't think about their own environment, just their own competing space. They need to understand what is happening in the other areas, what are the technologies which is coming up, because it could quickly wipe you out, which has happened in the past and which will definitely happen in the future as well. So VUCA environment is a constant that every organization, every company leader has to grasp it and understand it's here to stay. But you could try, because you already see companies which are performing exceptionally. So I can see some of my batchmates are here as well. So Expo Lanka, it's performing exceptionally in this environment, because why? They've been able to be ahead of the times, and they've been developing their people. So they've been really getting their people to learn new stuff. So they are able to cope up with all these changes. So sorry, I mentioned only one name, but I know there are other companies, but because of the bull run in the stock market for Expo, that's why I just want to keep them highlighted. So it's about either being changed how you work or be just swept away. So Netflix and Blockbuster is a classic example, because Blockbuster was the biggest thing, but I'm not sure if how many of you have heard of a Blockbuster in the US market. And Google, it was once Yahoo was told Google and tried to sell Google to Yahoo. And now you don't have, you've not heard, some of you are not even using Yahoo, but Google has developed into such a big company. So right now they've grown into such a big magnitude, and there are discussions about Google self-driving cars as well. So who thought that Google will come to automobile manufacturing? So that happens. And that's where I leave with a quote from the good Sir Winston Churchill, the Nobel Prize winner. To improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. Thank you. And I hope you learned something on VUCA during this small, brief webinar. Over to you, Shu.
Great. Thank you very much, Ramindu. That was brilliant, very nicely done. And I love the fact that both the side you have used VUCA versus VUCA. So how volatility, uncertainty, and complexity and ambiguity can be used and transform into vision, understanding, and clarity and agility. Wow, this is really interesting. And then and a very practical examples you have given, really nicely done. So before we go to the Q&A session, I want you to give a virtual round of applause to Ramindu for doing justice to the topic, planning in the VUCA environment. I mean, this is, you just have to do the opposite. That's about it, and then you get the certainty. It's very simple. And supply chain is all about simplicity. Thank you very much for making the supply chain so simple. And so before we go forward with the Q&A, let's take a quick picture of everybody, then we go into the Q&A. Ramindu, would you stop sharing the slides? Then we can put everybody on this thing. Great. We'll just put everybody on the screen and take a quick picture and move on to, ladies and gentlemen, you can on your camera and show your beautiful or handsome faces and join us to take the picture. See, Ramindu is smiling away. He enjoyed doing the presentation as well. So you can put both your thumbs up if you want to. Great, awesome, great. Okay, Sashi, are we done?
Most of them, still the screens are off, so.
No problem. We go ahead, no problem.
Right.
Okay, great.
Right, okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, and special thanks to the people who have on their camera. Okay, great. So moving on, Ramindu, the Q&A, right? Now you mentioned about human touch. I mean, we can do the world's best planning in the whole wide world, right? But execution is very important, right? And execution is mostly done by, of course, human, right? We are not in that age yet, right? So you said there should be some cultural adjustment. So how long do you think it takes to a company to adjust to a certain culture? And which will contribute positively to the planning?
It's like this. Because a cultural shift, it doesn't happen in weeks or months. It could even take years. So it all depends on how the company wants to go in this journey. Because as I said, it's in the end, it's people. So I'll take a classic example. So because I was at Fonterra, so there was a lot of dealing with New Zealand teams. So New Zealand teams, how they worked. So this is about 7 years back, about 9 years back. So this could be outdated, but still they work. So if once it's five maybe, they just go. It's the work time is done, they move out. But if you take in Sri Lanka, especially during the early period of the pandemic, you would have meetings in a local company, even at 8, 9, 10 people are calling and asking, have you done this? Have you done this? So it's the culture, because in Sri Lanka, it's so because people know that you are in home, you don't have anywhere to go, you don't have anything to do. So people just assume, okay, let's have meetings at that moment, at that time as well, because your normal 8:30 to 5 timeline isn't sufficient. So, but it's on the culture, because now if that same company wanted to move out to a different, let's say to New Zealand, it would give you massive repercussion, because they wouldn't just say, no, sorry, just our time is over, my time is over, move away. It's my personal time. So that's where you need to respect the culture. So because in answer, so right now my role, it's more a global role. So though I do look after the Lankan plants as well, but I have my colleagues in US, in Brussels, in Malaysia. So it's about trying to find a time where everyone is comfortable. So most of the time it could be for them. So for the US team, it's actually sometimes they come at 7 a.m. For us, it would be around 5 or 5:30. So that's where because you are in an environment where you're in different zones of the world, you still need to have that connectivity. And that's where people understand. So sometimes we stay maybe at about 8 p.m., 9 p.m., we have the calls with them so that it's fair on them as well. So that's where this understanding about respecting different cultures comes into play. Sure, you are on mute.
Yes, my mic is in mute. Yes, correct. Okay, great. Yes. So of course, what you're saying, but to develop that culture, it will take a bit of time. Not overnight, it happens, right? And it depends on the leadership. Am I correct?
It depends greatly on the leadership, as well as the signals that a leader is giving to your members. Now, if a leader before the pre-pandemic, if he was consistent in his messages, if he had said, we'll do this, and if he had actually done that, then it gives confidence to his members, to the team, that even during the pandemic, because in the pandemic, because everything is crazy, you don't know what would happen in the next minute. There could be so much drastic changes. So then you need that trust would be the main thing that would work in the company. So if you hadn't given the signals of trust and trustfulness, if the leader hadn't given it out, when it was more or less a good time, then how would a leader expect the members to respond? Would they trust him or her?
No. Yeah.
So it's, as a leader, there's so much responsibility on the shoulder of the leaders, on how they're guiding the teams, on how they're telling them what needs to be done. So leaders, that's why I think I mentioned it quite a lot of times. Everyone here is a leader, because in the end, it's not, the leader isn't simply a person who manages a set of teams, because you could be a leader maybe in your social circle, maybe you are maybe a Rotary, maybe in other organizations where you are a leader. So there comes a situation where your words, you need to understand whether you do what you say, or you just say, and then just like local politicians, you just go and say, you do another total separate thing.
Right, got it. Great, thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have any question, please go ahead and ask. And I would like to acknowledge, I noticed somebody in the crowd. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Satyendra, the head of supply chain Nestle among us. Hi, Sati, how are you? Thank you for joining us. Sati, are you there? Hello. Okay, moving on, probably he's not able to unmute. Okay, so any questions?
Small verse of Sati. Yes.
Sorry. What are you saying, Ravindu?
So Sati, I think it's a small world, so that's why supply chain is a really small world where it's connected.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Swati, I think, interviewed me about 10 or 11 years back when I was trying to get into the job market.
Right. Got it. Okay. Great. So, friends, if you have any question, here's an opportunity for you to ask the specialist, the planning specialist, who will tell you how to use the VUCA style to do your planning. Okay, I'm getting okay, Muhammad Zahir Rahman, he's saying, great and nice presentation. This is Ramindu. Great.
Thank you.
Any questions? If you have any questions, you see, ladies and gentlemen, I am not the professional or specialist here. You are the specialist. So we brought a specialist for you to answer question. Please ask, and definitely you will get the answer. Ramindu, how was your, you just finished CSCM, right? How was your experience of going through this program?
It was good. One thing is, because I had my basic degree in transport and logistics management, so most of the things I already knew. So what I really appreciate is the connectivity between the students. That was also when we are doing the learning session, because we are doing it online. So I had from Sri Lanka, I had Rajita from Nestle.
Right, yes, Rajita, yeah.
And then we had a lot of students from Bangladesh. So Sajid Bhai, can't remember the names right now. So Sajid was the one who was the main contributor, because he was in British American Tobacco, Bangladesh, and he a lot of examples. So that's where we learned from him, because he was a person who had been in the industry for 20 years. So I think a lot of us learned from him as well, even though in lectures he was giving examples on how they're done it. So that's what I really appreciate, the people from different industries, different countries learning together.
Got it. Okay, great. Awesome. So we have a question. Okay, he goes like, hi, Rami. Okay, I like the way he called you. Hi, Rami. Okay. He's saying, how fast regulators will adjust for this new environment? That's one. And what will be the possible impacts? There are two questions from him.
Yeah. So regulators.
From Niranjan.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what regulators, so let's take maybe policymakers. So first thing we need to understand is Sri Lanka, we are a bit slow in trying to connect with the world, because we are comfortable in our zones. We don't want to move out of that comfort zone and maybe move into this and move with the flow. We would rather like to hang on to a tree bark or something and say, rescue me, rescue me. So regulators, I'm really not sure what would happen for a local companies, because you don't see much of this regulation happen. But if you had listened to news, so government, I think, gazetted for the essential food items. So you would see some of these happening, but you need to understand is VUCA environment, it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. So if you are not, even for the regulators, if they are not quickly, because regulators are there to protect somebody or some people. So if the regulators are not there to protect the people, then there would be business interests who would try to take adverse impact out of it. So even the popular example these days is these rapid antigen kits. So people actually don't know whether there is any. So it's a very thin ice that people are treading, because we actually don't know what is the price that they're importing. So a person in the company would definitely know this is the price that we import and this is the price that we sell. So is there a super profit that they're making? If not, how can the National Medical Regulatory Association, the NMRA, step in and say, okay, here's the maximum price, and help at the moment, because we need to have people doing this PCR and the RAT tests done. So that's why regulators have to step up. So I'm really not sure if the if I had answered the question, but it's about trying to move with the flow. So that's what I want to say in the end. Sure, you are in mute. You're on mute, sure.
Hello. Yeah, got it. Okay, finally. Yeah, actually, I am not in mute. My mic was in mute. That's what happened.
The mic has its own mind in this book environment.
Exactly. Okay, great. I think what you said about the last question answer is that it's about agility, how agile we want to be, the policymakers. It depends on that, how the changes are going to happen. So, Movie, thank you very much for the answer. Okay, Sati is saying great presentation, Ramindu. Congratulations. Unable to unmute Shuvo. That's what he's saying. No worries, Sati. No matter what, we love you. And okay, great. My next question, I thought it's a very, very good question from Jihan. Jihan is asking. Jihan is asking, current freight rates, vessel allocation are impacting to the landing cost of the raw material, especially the freight from China to Sri Lanka, or freight from China to Sri Lanka. Therefore, what sort of strategy that we can take in here?
Okay, so one question is, a lot of plants, a lot of manufacturing hubs are what they call now inshoring. So earlier the buzzword was outsourcing. So now some of the companies are inshoring. So what happens is they are moving to some countries, which is their country of origin. And some are moving to what they call trying to get to an area where they have these raw materials. So this is a thing which will happen in future. So why are we are right now, most of the companies, we are dependent on China. We are dependent on from the raw materials or maybe machinery coming from China. And that leads to your freight rates, your raw materials, everything goes up. So most of the companies are trying to do is, now if you have a sourcing, so this won't work for every situation. But so if you have a sourcing requirement, and if it's only coming from China, then what you could do is have advanced negotiation with your freight forwarders. But I know even with contracts, you would be at the mercy of the shipping lines because they would be having a contrive their space so that because they need to make profits as well. But try to see if you can get those raw materials from another country, because right now that's one of the main things which are being done by companies is they are not maintaining single source most of the time. They're trying to see what are the other sources that you could have, and you could then ensure that you have a steady raw material supply and you can negotiate even with a supplier who had a higher bargaining power, saying, okay, we have this one coming in as well. So what can you do for us? So a lot depends on your relationship as well. So that's why I take an example of Ansel. So right now, Ansel, it's earlier the direction. So when the CEO, Magnus Nicolin came in, at that point in 2010, how the understanding is it will be on outsourcing. But afterwards, with the disruption, especially in the US market, on the disruption that happened there, people understood that no, we have to be in control of the supply chain and started moving the manufacturing facilities back to the Ansel, as Ansel. And right now there is capacity. So a glove, so what the thought is, there should be at least 2 locations where you could manufacture the same glove. So at any disruption, you'd be able to service the market from the other plant. So it's the same kind of thinking when you're trying to get your raw materials from one source. One of the quickest thing, and I know even most of the Lankan companies do it, they try to get another source activated. You need to activate your quality, so you have to go through that process. But that's where the companies which are thriving in this VUCA environment have done correctly. They've already identified these previously and kept them, giving them small quantities so that they could activate it at these points of time. So then you are not dependent. But this, because this freight rates seems it's still here to stay, because still the supply is limited. So what they're doing is they're artificially increasing the rates, which happened to sugar very recently in Sri Lanka as well. They're restricting the supply. So we are at the hands of the supply, the shipping lines at this moment. So sometimes you just have to wait it out. And the unfortunate thing would be then sometimes you need to pass it on to your end customers. So that's the end result, that nobody wants to do it, but that could be the final thing. A lot of people just push it out.
Okay, and I'm back. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the reply. Okay, so we have Danushka Pereira. So he's saying this is a super session. How frequently you plan to have this type of knowledge enhancing session? Please do let us know. Love to let you know, and we'll invite you. Every month, actually, we have this supply chain transformation webinar. Now, we do this to demonstrate the capability of our student of CSCM, certified supply chain for the managers, which Ravindu just completed. So that's the objective behind it. So definitely we'll let you know next time. Okay, Usman is asking, hi sir, what are some suggestion for students in the VUCA world? What do you suggest? Ravindu?
I'll share a link here so that everyone could read it. So it was done by OECD, Organization for Economic and Cooperation Development. So what they've mentioned is what are the educational points that needs to be highlighted in 2030. What could be the big things that people need to focus on? And one thing was in the VUCA world, how your brain works, especially how your brain works in uncertainty. So a classic example that was there is if you're walking down an alleyway on a day time and the same alley at the night. So same road in the night time and daytime. So daytime, because you could see, you have a better visual cues that, so you wouldn't be surprised even if some person is coming in, because you can detect what's the facial expression. So there the uncertainty is lesser. But if it's at night, even if it's the road that you've been using for maybe past 20 to 30 years, still the shadows could play tricks in your mind, because your brain quickly gives you the worst case scenario that it could imagine, saying this could be a snake, this could be a burglar, whereas it's just maybe a tree, it's just blowing, the wind is blowing, it's a sound of the wind. So it's where your brain is not tuned in. So that's where because that's why it's said about psychological impactness, where your mindfulness, in Sinhala it's samasati. So if you are not in the moment, in the present, you are not in control of in the situation. So I'll share the link here. So for students, it's one of the first thing is trying to understand how you could cope with uncertainty in life. And this is a time period because of COVID. You see, when you go through your Facebook, you see people sending out commiserations, someone you had known has passed away. So it's a very unsettling time. And you need to still try to understand what makes you tick, because when you are in this negative term of mind, your outlook of the world also turn negative. So that's why when the suicide cases happen, because people are always in the negative kind of thing, in this negative mindset. So that's why that gold medal yesterday from Dinesh Priyantha Hera is such a positive thing that could have happened to the Sri Lankan community, because it's always the negative news and suddenly we get a big positive news. Everyone is sharing, everyone is cheering. That's those are very small moments, but you need to enjoy in these times, because otherwise you will be still in this negative mindset. So I'll share the link so you could do some further reading for everyone here. If you're interested, please read. It's a very interesting article that they have done.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, this time I came on time. Nobody could mute me. Okay, mute my mic. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that link. I'm sure that is very useful. And you correctly said that the winning of this medal has definitely put a very positive twist in the present situation. And I'm so glad that it has happened. And so the next question is from Sasira. Okay. Sasira is saying, hi Ramindu, what is your opinion about port shutdown due to COVID?
I think I know Sasira. So
okay.
he's in a terminal. So if a port shutdowns, it's like your heart stops because we are an island. Because we are fully dependent on what is coming in from the other countries, and it's like your heart of a human being. So if it shut down, just imagine the repercussions that the country would go through, because it's not a simple thing to pump your heart back into life. You need to then have artificial surgeries done quickly. So a port shutdown it's unimaginable, but at this moment, you need to understand it could be possible as well. So that's why I said some of the counter effects that companies have taken is increase their safety stock, because you never know where in which area, which port could shut down, which company could shut down, whether you could have your supply going down because of COVID, their operations could have halted. So right now, Vietnam, I know Vietnam is in lockdown. So they've been nearly about 1 month. So people who are in Vietnam expecting maybe some raw materials, everyone has to wait until the government gives a signal to operate back into life. So a port shutdown is a worse nightmare scenario, but that is also possible because of it. But I know because of the importance, they will have skeleton crews. So that's why you have your pre-planning where you divide your members into different crews. They are not meeting with each other. You sanitize your workstations so that you ensure that your skeleton crew will operate the bare necessities until everyone is back. Okay. So I'm hoping that we don't face that situation.
Yes, definitely not. Okay, great. So Wadita Gamage is saying that regarding reply to Jihan's question, yes, large-scale manufacturers can do that, but for SMEs, what can they do? So Jihan is asking about that, sourcing for different places. So because he's saying, if I'm not mistaken, SMEs are the 80% of the national economy. You're right. So what do you think the SMEs can do, Ramindu?
That's a good question, and that's where, yeah, that's where I think most of the people are struggling as well, and that's when an SME could come into the big league as well, because in the end, it's small and medium entrepreneurs earlier. So if you take the companies that are big right now, they were once SMEs as well.
Yeah.
So it's a mindset. That's where we need to break it, because if Sri Lanka was on the path of a 8% to 10% GDP growth, which was happening maybe 5 years or 10 years back, by 2032, we were to hit a developed country. And to do that, people need to pull their socks up. So that's where, when you say SMEs, because then it's like a subsidiary mentality. You're saying we are small, we can't compete with the big timers. Let me give you a very classic example where this SMEs really toppled even multinationals. So I think some of you may have heard the Kalin soap. I think no one would have heard it about 1 year back. But they gave a great run to the multinationals in this country, where I think right now either they are number one or number two in the beauty context. And it's how they were able to declutter the market and give a product to the consumer, and to ensure that the consumer came back for that product itself. So when you go to a shop, they would only ask for that. They wouldn't ask for any other soap. They would, I need a soap of Kelly. So it was an SME as well. So it's all about the mindset. And I know because you don't have the bargaining power, you are at the mercy of the suppliers. But then people, that's why some of the SMEs will go to greatness and some will just die down because they are not able to cope with it. So it depends. That's why I said it all depends on how people cope with this uncertainty in this volatile environment, because even big companies could go down.
Yes, correct. And I actually know the example of what you mentioned. I know the story. In fact, later on, I think the multinational came and examined that what happened. And this soap company, they didn't do any market research, nothing. They just went, did very simple steps and then really put others in trouble. I know about the story. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay. So Danushka is asking, what are the predictions of continuation current uncertainty in vessel delays and high price charges? Any indication which starts down? Do you think the world's trend will go down?
Right now, the indication is this will continue to remain. It won't disappear suddenly. So we actually did a revision on the lead times from different ports from going out from the Lankan port to other ports that we service, from the inwards from maybe Malaysia to Colombo, Malaysia to US. So we actually increased everything because it won't go right now because of the uncertainty. Even vessels, as I said earlier, they've controlled the number of vessels that are plying in the route. So it won't go down immediately, but I'm not a futuristic astrologer as well. But if everything works right, so it's a very hard term to say, if everything works right, ideally in the next 6 to 9 months, you would see it down, but even then there could be another totally new thing happening. And then again, the freight rates could increase.
Very unpredictable. No? So it's better to use the understanding of the situation and the clarity of VUCA, right? U and C. Yeah. So then we get a better idea. Great, thank you very much. Any more question? If not, then okay, we'll do a countdown. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. This has been a wonderful. Okay, one more question. Ravindu, shall I read it out for you?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Sri Lanka government changing the ways arranging the payments to suppliers. What is the idea about method of payments when going wrong? Rupees depreciation.
Now this is a hard thing because all the signs shows that Sri Lanka would go into a recession unless there is some stern action taken by the government to reverse it. But knowing how the policymakers are, we are all in for a hard time, but we have to enjoy, even in the hard times, we need to enjoy what we are going through. So what happens is we are not getting, the simple thing is we are not getting enough dollars into the country. So that's the first thing. So that's where I think people need to understand how can we get dollars moving back to the economy. So whatever said and done, our number one income earner, mainly after the apparels, I still think it's number one, but it's domestic workers who send the majority of the revenue. So they are here as well. And then we have tourism, which is still not fully kicked in. It's still they're trying to pump getting the tourists back, but still with COVID. So I know they very recently opened a bubble with India tourists so that they could visit. So until we get government to understand that we need to have the foreign US dollars incoming, it's an opportunity. You need to consider the opportunity here, because now if you are an exporter, you will be worth your weight in gold, because now is the time. If you are able to manufacture or provide a service, so that's where the IT firms are really like gold mines right now. And if you see companies, yeah, if you're in the freight forwarding companies, just take export. They recently even acquired a company in Central America, I think, yesterday or day before news. So that's when the local companies have to think about how are we going. It's not about servicing the country itself. It's trying to understand how we are going to connect with the global supply chain. And that's the first issue that we have, because in the end, rupee depreciation, everything would happen. But to come out of it, it says if you are in the well, you need to come out of the, I'll say it in Sinhalese because it's more, so if we are right now rupee depreciation, everything we speak about, but then if we want to come out, we need, it's the only way that we have to come out by getting more exports going in and connecting to the global supply chain. We can't say we are an island and we are not avoiding this global supply chain. It can't happen. We have to get connected with the supply chain and say we open up.
Great. Thank you very much. In fact, I add to that what you're saying. Recently, I read an article that June was the highest month of revenue earning in foreign currency because we had highest number of exports from Sri Lanka. There was an article recently I read last week. Okay, this will be the last question. Kasun is asking how to have stable assumptions in place for planning despite the VUCA.
Now it's like this. I know the company, so I know I can think I can, because my previous boss is also there. So
okay,
if they should know what are the assumptions that they need to take. But it's like this. Gone are the days where you could just think, okay, here is my number 1, 2, 3 assumptions, and based on that we are working. That has to move out, because as I said, right now I know this company, they are not able to go full blast with the supply because they had an issue on, because their workers got infected, so they had to remove those team members out, and now they are only catering maybe let's say 50% to what is actually required in the market. And it's not easy. So that's the first thing that everyone in the not in the company, but everyone here needs to understand. This is not easy, but what you need to understand is there isn't any stable assumptions going forward. It's all fluid. So what worked for you earlier. So that's where this statement comes in. Could be true at that point, but it won't happen if you just sit on the laurels of that statement and think we were the ones who did best at that time. Yes, you would have been the one who done it best at that time, but you need to always consider, are you the ones who are doing it best at this time? And your numbers, your sales results would show you, are you really doing it great, or are you not doing not so great? So my only advice is you can't have stable assumptions in this environment that is gone out of the window. So that's why it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, ambiguous. But then if you have your vision in place, if you're agile, if you have clarity in what you're going to do, and if you have understanding, that would help to see the market, the change in the market dynamics, rather than how you did earlier.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Very clear answer. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ravindu, for your time. Yes.
If anyone still has questions, please feel free to connect in LinkedIn. So yes. I'm in LinkedIn. So just drop a message.
So why don't you put your LinkedIn? Do you have the LinkedIn here? You can put it on the chat box. Okay. Your LinkedIn link. In fact, hi Ramindu, would you please share the recording of this? Yes, we will be, Danushka, we will be sharing it on our page. This is actually live right now on our Facebook, so anybody can come and watch it anytime. It would be there. But apart from that, we will be sharing the recording of this program, and would like to thank everybody who has joined today evening. Thank you very much, Ramindu, for your time.
The most profitable companies in the world have learned to use their supply chains to keep goods and services flowing into the marketplace. But supply chain processes are only as good as the people who keep them running. Supply chain employment opportunities are constantly being created, and ISCEA certified professionals are getting the best paid jobs. If you wish to become a sound supply chain professional and gain real-world experience and knowledge, then ISCEA is your one-stop source for supply chain education, certification, and recognition. ISCEA is the International Supply Chain Education Alliance. We were the first organization certifying supply chain professionals around the globe, and we remain the worldwide authoritative resource for supply chain career validation, with thousands of certificate holders commanding top-tier salaries. Our certification programs are aligned with best practices and industry-proven standards. They bring together academic research advances and innovative industry trends, validating that you have the knowledge used by top companies to remain competitive in an ever-changing business environment. For your company, that translates into significant cost reductions, faster revenue growth, and a collaborative teamwork environment. For your career, it means exceeding everyone's expectations and taking control of your future. So, what are you waiting for? Stand out from the crowd and take your career to the next level with an ISCEA internationally recognized supply chain certification.